I didn't get to go on an ice ride along, but my buddy over at Dallas Express did. Chris Putnam's coming back on the James Show. And so I saw some of your preliminary reporting on this. First thing I noticed, Chris, is that ice starts real early.
Yeah, I noticed that too. I was almost late. We had to be there at 4 a.m. for the initial briefing.
You had to be there at 4 a.m.
The briefing started at 4 a.m. Okay. Yeah, for the first capture opportunity. And I told my partner that was with me who was filming, I was like, hey, just pretend like, you're going hunting with your dad.
Yeah, deer hunting. That's what I was thinking.
It's just a different kind.
All right. So what's the briefing like? They go in and they're like, hey, we're just going to start pulling over random people of color and harassing them and maybe breaking apart some families. Go.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
Is that what it is?
Yeah. Like, who all can we go like harass today that shouldn't be harassed? No, it's actually quite different. In fact, we get there, of course, the first thing they do is offers vests, bulletproof vest. And then there's like 10 or 12 agents in the room, and the lead agent in this case for the operation takes everybody through the intel on the individual that's been targeted. And they have a very well planned and thought out capture plan. And this is one of the things that struck me the most was how much time and energy actually goes into the intel and the reconnaissance prior to them actually executing an operation. In this case, they obviously knew the individual's home. They knew the approximate hours that he would leave his home. They knew where he parked his car every night. They knew the route he principally would take to work, et cetera. So it was all very planned out. And then they put a map up with a grid of, from his home to where the capture zone was going to be and where everybody would be staged. So it was a lot of time and energy,
questions
put into the pre-planning.
How many people were in your crew going to capture one guy? Like, how many people does it take to apprehend one guy?
I'd say it was at least 10 to 12. And again, they're staged at different locations. You have people with eyes on the suspect or the suspect's home. And then you have people in the capture zone. We were staged a little bit below the capture zone. And then you have people that are in areas that are ancillary to the capture zone in the event that the suspect detours, which in this case they did. And they said was actually, a little bit rare. They went a different route than they typically did.
Okay. So how long does each raid take? Like what? Actually, let me start I'm trying to figure out the timetable here. At what time did you actually pull the guy over and apprehend him?
Well, so this one happened to be in North Fort Worth. We had to get from the Dallas ICE facility. That's the one that was attacked last year, where a couple of people were murdered, 3 shot. We had to get from there to North Fort Worth. Of course, that time in the morning, traffic's not so bad. I'd say that we were in position at about 5:30 for what's anticipated to be a 6:30 a.m. to 8 a.m. deployment when the individual leaves his home and starts heading out. And so we sat there for a while, just drinking coffee and chatting. And, it was a good opportunity for us because we got to ask a lot of questions. In this case, the suspect was not guilty of a crime in the United States. And everybody go, oh my gosh. But he was wanted for murder in El Salvador, MS-13 gang member, and a suspect in a lot of disappearances of folks that, haven't been found yet. So he was a pretty bad guy.
Well, Chris, Sonny Hostin in The View will tell you that illegal immigrants are less likely to commit crime than native-born Americans. So, we shouldn't be going after these guys.
Yeah, whatever. What's interesting about that, of course, is how UCR crime data is reported. If you're Hispanic or of Hispanic origin, the crime is actually reported as a white person. Well, as a Caucasian.
And a lot of states don't even take the information on your immigration status, your citizenship status. And that was something that came up in Ann Coulter's book, Adios America, is how when she was trying to find out how many illegals were in our prison system, there was no way of knowing. And so you have to go to like think tanks who kind of do surveys and plug it into formulas and guess. But there's no actual formal reporting records of this.
Well, that's why there's such a wide variance in terms of the estimates around how many illegals are actually in the country. You hear numbers as high as 20 million, 10 to 20 million. Some people think it's actually more than that. I honestly didn't realize until a lot of these enforcement activities started just how many criminals, there were, and it's considerable. And these guys have been very clear with us about that. They were also very clear that, they're not driving up to the day laborer pool at the Home Depot and just grabbing people. The only time, this is what they told us, of course, the only time that they get somebody that wasn't actually targeted is if there was a group of people around the suspect and it turns out that they're there illegally as well, or somebody trying to help the suspect.
So give me the scene now. Was there a lot of fuss that was happening around him? Did anybody try and interfere? Were there any activists that were trying to block you in with their cars, or is that something that doesn't happen around here?
There was none of that.
Good.
It was actually remarkably efficient. He did so basically they closed in on the cars and forced him to stop. He did put up a bit of a fight, but there were no weapons or anything involved. And there's an overwhelming number of people there to subdue him, but it was all over in a matter of minutes. And then, we spent some time going through the assailant's vehicle, making sure he's, properly secured, et cetera. But it happens very quickly. No one else was involved. No neighbors came outside. There were no protesters, of course. And in this case, of course, it was pretty early in the morning. I think it was still before 7 a.m., which with some of the really bad guys, I think they do purposely to ensure that, there's not some drama that's created. And they certainly don't want to go to a workplace or anything like that. So, no, just very quick and executed flawlessly, from what I could see. And then we take you back to the Dallas ICE facility, go through the booking process. And, part of that is then he's referred over to an immigration court and they kind of handle the rest.
So what happens the rest of the day?
They go do it again. My understanding, or at least what they explained to us, is they do as many as 3 or 4 a day in a normal work day. And I think there's a team that, works at night as well. One of the really interesting things was there's a group of permanent protesters that's set up with a tent and food and things like that outside the ICE facility. And one of the leaders of that group is a pastor. And the gentleman who happens to run...
That's so annoying.
The gentleman that happens... They've actually, in the past, for folks that had come to turn themselves in or to report for a probationary thing, have helped them, escape. Not do it. Talk them out of going into the building. But there's a pastor who is one of the lead figures there, and he and the head of the Dallas, region, they have coffee and chat every day for a few minutes, and the pastor prays for him, and it's very interesting.
Okay, so here's my concern. You got 10 guys and they can pick up 2 or 3 people a day. How are we ever going to deport 10 million, 20 million illegals at this rate?
Well, I can tell you firsthand. I mean, part of the reason we were invited by Homeland Security to do a ride along is because, there's just not a lot of accurate reporting about what actually goes on. Shocker, right? And what their real intent is and who they're focusing on, et cetera, as well as the impact to these agents in their personal lives. But, one of the debates that's absolutely going on is that there's people within the administration at very senior levels of ICE and Homeland Security that want to go much, much faster. And, there's politics even within the administration that are preventing that from a speed point of view. They think they can continue to bring on agents. And there's no lack of interest from folks, wanting to join ICE. So that's another interesting dynamic. A lot of it has to do with how they hold all these people. And you probably heard the story not long ago. I think it was out in, was it Hutchins, that actually a person I know is very senior in the department was responsible for helping identify that 1 million square foot facility that they're going to, basically turn into a holding center.
Right.
And, the city government got all worked up and the seller of the property backed out. So there's limiting factors like that.
That's so annoying. All right. So you met some of these ICE officers. I think I have a pretty polarizing job. This sounds fun on the radio, but out in the real world, I'm kind of cautious of who I, tell my profession. New people, you don't know if it's going to be one of the crazies. You could be talking to the next Rosie O'Donnell, and I don't want to tell them I'm a talk radio host because then they'll say, what station? I'll say WBAP, and then I'm a Nazi, right? So I imagine for ICE officers, the polarization must be even worse.
It's tough. Like we went into a lot of detail around that with them. And I have to say, I mean, they were incredibly open with their experience. A lot of them have people within their own families, who are incredibly critical. And of course, with neighbors and some friends, they never disclose it, who their employer is, and what they do for a living, because they're concerned about that very thing, particularly agents that have kids in school, because that can become a problem.
Oh, so that's me, dude.
They deal with a lot. I mean, can you imagine that Thanksgiving dinner? That's a little different than arguing with your uncle about Donald Trump.
I've been there. Just like a quick example here. When my oldest kid was in kindergarten, I was on an evening show, so I wasn't at work when school was on. So I was one of the homeroom moms. It was me and this other lady. The other lady might as well have been Greta Thunberg. She was like, she would text me. She was like, should we charter a bus to take it to the state capitol and they can protest for gun control? I was like, hell no.
Oh my gosh.
And I had to tell Miss Parker, I'm like, we're going to have to do something about Eve, man, because she's going to quit or I'm going to quit. Or if she finds out who I am, she's going to kill me. She's going to make a shank out of the nearest object and stab me with it. So, So
one of the things they point out that's, fascinating is that they're like, look, the job we're doing is no different from the job we were doing 20 years ago and nobody cared. It's literally the same job.
Oh, absolutely. Now here's the one thing that if I was in your position,
as many people as they did under Obama at this point, as you know, of course, a lot of those are they're counting in the numbers of the people that self-deport, but they're like, the only thing that changed was the politics and the fact that, the far left just completely flipped, on the subject of illegal immigration and deportation. As you well know, Biden, Obama, Hillary Clinton, they were all adamant that, we needed to step up immigration enforcement.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's going to do it for our time. Where can we find more on your ride-along experience with ICE, Chris Putnam?
Yeah, the long-form video, it's only about 10 minutes. It's going to be out this week. Maybe tomorrow, maybe the next day. You can find it at DallasExpress.com or any of our socials.
Thank you very much, Chris Putnam from Dallas Express, who will be with me at the Parker Pour coming up on Thursday. He's going to be sitting in the 4 o'clock hour. The Parker's Pour, something I do the third Thursday of every month, and it's at Whiskey and Rye. That is the lobby bar in the Omni Fort Worth Hotel. That's that cool building that you see in downtown Fort Worth. It has the sharp edges with the balconies that kind of jut out to a point. Well, the lobby bar of that one right across the street from the Fort Worth Convention Center. It's a fantastic little place where I'm going to do a live show from 2 to 5. So I'll be out there. You can see me. You can meet some of my regular guests. Putnam will be there. I think Kaylee Campbell's going to be there, and we'll bring in some other people who are regulars on the show. And then after the live show, you're going to hang out for a happy hour, and I am going to host for you 2 rounds of trivia, one at 5:30, one at 6:30. I have prizes for both rounds and a prize for whoever wins the both of them. So come on out. I would love to meet you, shake your hand, and you can judge me based on my appearance at Whiskey and Rye. It's the Parker's Pour this Thursday.
The James Show Podcast.